Okay, welcome everyone to an experiment, and I'm so glad you're here today. Citizens Climate Lobby Canada in December decided that we wanted to meet with our provincial parliamentarians to discuss harmonization of provincial policies. And they've been planning this for the last 5 months. So thank you for taking part in history. My name is Kathy Orlando, and I work as the program director at Citizens Climate International, and I am also Canadian. Ani, bienvenue, and welcome. I would like for you all to quietly, if you can, acknowledge in your mind the land upon which you are calling in from. Our agenda is packed. You are in the Zoom room where it is happening today. I am trying my best to create the shortest introduction to a conference ever. So please read our booklet to get to know our guest speakers and our artists. You are all exceptional. Thank you for being here today. Kian, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Kathy, for putting this on, and thank you all for participating in this. I'm really excited to be here. I'm going to share my slideshow. Let me know if you can't see this, but I'm going to assume you can see my slides. So what I'm going to be sharing with you today are a couple lines of research that I've done about carbon taxes and explain how they're helpful for you. So we know why we're here today. Last month, the Supreme Court found, of course, that the Canadian backstop federal carbon pricing plan is constitutional. And that means that we have this requirement federally to have carbon taxes. But of course, that doesn't answer all the questions. And in particular, it tells us that it's constitutional, but it doesn't tell us whether carbon taxes and carbon pricing more generally is good policy in Canada, and whether it's good policy in Canada today. And today, I'm going to try to help you understand those two questions, whether it's important today, in particular, by today, I mean during the pandemic period, and whether it's good policy, in particular, whether there are good objections to it and how we can answer those objections. So the two takeaways I want for you to understand from this presentation is, first of all, that the pandemic has strengthened, not weakened, the case for carbon taxes. And that should be surprising to you. I think that that's a conclusion that you might not expect. And the second conclusion I want you to take away is that several common objections, and I'm going to highlight two of them, against carbon taxes can be answered. And I'm going to try to rebut those. And the first objection we can answer by saying that carbon taxes do change behavior. So the most recent up-to-date information we have, and when I mean up-to-date, I mean just a few months old, is that globally speaking, carbon pricing does correlate with changes in behavior. And the second is that if we plan our carbon pricing policies effectively, then they don't have to increase regressivity. They don't have to hit hardworking Canadians harder. Okay, so let's go through these. First of all, let's discuss why carbon taxes today. So you, your colleagues, your constituents, they might all be concerned that the pandemic is a bad time to strengthen or introduce carbon pricing policies. You might think, well, Canadians are facing economic and financial and health difficulties. Why would we want a policy that would make a major difference in their lives? And the answer is that together with colleagues, I've argued that actually now is the best time. It's not true that it's a bad time to introduce carbon pricing. And there are several reasons for this. So the first reason is that we usually are concerned about taxes because they impact what kind of economic activity we have. You know, they hit demand. But that's not the case today during the pandemic. The demand shocks we've seen in the pandemic is not about marginal prices. It's not because things are too expensive. Now, here's some evidence for that. So here's a rather busy slide from McKinsey, but it shows how different Canadians have responded to different sectors. So in particular, I'll draw your attention to things like international flights or hotel stays or out-of-home entertainment, that's going to movie theaters. All of these things have taken major hits, but they're not because the marginal cost is too high. It's not because the cost of going to the theater is too expensive. It's because of the health risks. People don't want to be at physical risk and put other Canadians at risk. And so what that means is that in this context, we're less sensitive. It's not an issue of price sensitivity, it's an issue of health. So that's on the demand side, on the consumer side. But let's think as well about the supply side, the production side. So we've had major shocks to our production. We're onshoring, we're reshoring, we're changing the way that Canadians produce various goods. And that, of course, that churn has been baked into the system. Because of the pandemic, we've had these shocks. And so if we put a carbon price in now, we will change the way that we respond to those. We will change our production and supply chains so that they're greener. And that leads us into the recovery period, right? So hopefully towards the end of this year, maybe into the beginning of next year, we'll be rebuilding Canada. We'll be trying to come back stronger and greener than we have in the past. If we already have carbon pricing systems that are policies that are implemented, then we'll have incentives, market incentives for those new businesses, for those new products and services to be such that we're generating more green production, green services and jobs, as opposed to the unsustainable browner jobs of the past. Okay, so those arguments are some quick reasons why we should think that actually now is a good time to use and strengthen carbon pricing. So together with an influential intellectual whose name is Peter Singer, I co-authored an opinion piece making this point in the project called Project Syndicate, which syndicates opinion pieces around the world. So this was translated into multiple languages, published in many countries. And so that's a sort of a short opinion version of this argument. And then subsequently with other academic colleagues, I made an academic version and sort of a more technical version of this for the journal Climate Policy. And in the climate policy piece, we explained, using some more theory and some more evidence and some more jargon, to be frank, why this is the best time. And don't worry, you don't have to screenshot any of these. All of this will be available in the chat, all these slides. Okay, so that brings us to the second of these lines of evidence. So this first one has to do with why now. The second has to do with why carbon taxes, right? So you, again, or your constituents or your colleagues might be wondering, what are the drawbacks? They might be concerned, for example, that carbon taxes don't change behavior. A lot of people find it hard to imagine that if it was more expensive to fill up the tank, that they would actually change their behavior. The second worry is that carbon taxes will increase inequalities. And if we think just about the tax part, so the payment part for the consumers, that's usually true in most jurisdictions. And by that I mean, for poorer Canadians, a larger proportion of their monthly income is spent on things like gasoline, things like home heating. And of course, we know that's a problem in Canada where the distances are really large and some parts are really cold. But both of these objections can be met. And so let's talk about those. So the first way we can respond to this is thinking about the most recent up-to-date evidence that carbon taxes in general and carbon pricing more broadly do change behavior. And so when I say up-to-date, I mean very recently. So just in late 2020, Rohan Best and colleagues wrote about some analysis of global trends in how carbon prices affect changes in mitigation, that is, reductions in emissions. You can see in this graph black triangles, which indicate the jurisdictions where there were carbon prices, and the green circles are the jurisdictions where there are no carbon prices. And you can just visually see, but also statistically significantly, it's the case that those places with carbon prices had lower emissions growth and sometimes emissions reductions over these 2 decadal periods than the green circles, which did not have carbon prices. Now, of course, there's a lot more to say, but this is a strong piece of prima facie evidence that jurisdictions with carbon prices do reduce their emissions. It's also, it's worth noting, dose dependent, meaning that those places with larger carbon prices had greater decreases. So that's even more evidence that this is the case. What about the second objection? Well, the second concern is that the initial impact of carbon pricing is regressive. And that's true. But of course, those resources don't just disappear. They're sent to the government, and the government can do various things. Now, of course, well-designed policy processes can return or rebate those. And a very standard way to do that, and the way that CCL supports, is a simple equal per capita lump sum refund. That means just dividing up that revenue amongst citizens. Now, surprisingly, although the initial impact is regressive, and dividing that lump sum equal per capita without reference to any income is sort of neutral, it's not intentionally progressive or regressive, the actual net result of those two things together is progressive. And I want that to sink in. That's not an obvious thing. But you don't have to just take my word for it. We can appeal to the parliamentary budget officer. So the parliamentary budget officer analyzed the federal backstop plan in 2020. And as you can see, in different provinces, there are different effects, but in all of the provinces, we see strikingly progressive effects. So the negative amounts, meaning rebates, you pay negative net taxes, right, hit the lower 4 quartiles. So sort of the roughly the 80 poorest percent of Canadians will get back more than they pay, whereas usually the top quintile, the top 20%, sometimes the top 2 quintiles, the top 40%, end up paying more than they get back. So what does that mean? This is a progressive policy. It means that there is some redistribution from those Canadians that are wealthiest and most able to pay in net terms to those who are poorest and least able to pay. And that means that we can change, this is a progressive policy. It's not regressive as you might be concerned. Okay, so I wrote this up for the Montreal Journal Les Ateliers de l'Éthique, and this is open access, meaning that it's available freely and legally to anyone, anywhere. And what I did was I rebutted several common objections, and these were 2 of them, but there were other ones in the article as well. Okay, so what does all of this mean for you? Well, when you are writing policy briefs, when you are writing talking points, when you are talking to constituents or your colleagues, it can be helpful to have peer-reviewed academic literature that responds to and justifies various points. So if people ask, why now? Why should we introduce carbon pricing during the pandemic circumstances? You can refer them to this Project Syndicate piece for sort of a general opinion audience, or to the climate policy article to a sort of a more technical audience as appropriate. If people ask, will it work? Is carbon pricing a good policy? Why should we introduce a policy that has carbon pricing? You can refer to the ethics forum piece, which again rebuts several common concerns to these kinds of policies. Now, I think that my pieces are even more helpful for these circumstances than some other academic literature. And that's because I wrote the Project Syndicate and the Ethics Forum piece very accessibly. So I wrote them with a minimum of jargon. They're quite brief, relatively speaking, and they're supposed to be very accessible. Secondly, for the Ethics Forum piece, I also tried to rely on mostly open access sources. So someone who reads that can also follow a lot of the sources that I use to generate my conclusions. And that makes it even more transparent. Finally, the Project Syndicate and Ethics Forum pieces, I said, are open access, meaning they're free to the public legally forever. The climate policy is also currently free, that piece, but it may go behind a paywall. So if you might be interested, please download it now. Maybe in 2 months or 3 months, depending on when the publisher decides, it might go back behind a paywall. I don't know exactly when. Okay, so that brings me to closing. So please use these resources, please share them, please use them for policy documents or share them with constituents, however they might be helpful. And ask me if you have questions, both in the Q&A and of course also contact me privately if you prefer. Let me know how I can be of service. And just for your reference, again, here are links to all of those pieces. Thank you so much for your attention. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Kian. Does anybody have a question? Can you please put it in the chat? And what you're seeing on the right to Kian is our artist, Erica. She's drawing what our guest speakers are saying. And yep, the links are not in the chat, but the
I have re-uploaded the handout slides, so you can get all of that information in that PDF.
Okay. Well, are there any questions? I'm going to take that as a good sign. That was very thorough. And I thank you so much for this, Kian. We are chock full. I encourage you to stay till the end and we will continue. That was wonderful. This is keeping us right on time too. Okay, this is great. Okay, so next we will move to Clean Prosperity. Are you here, Sarah? Are you able to?
Hiya.
Hi, okay, I just got to find you and spotlight you. And remove this. Yeah, just keep talking and we will find you.
Okay, great. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. And I'm so happy to follow Kian because that was a fantastic presentation that gives you all the evidence you need to make the argument, which I will now help you back up with some marketing fluff. So my name's Sarah. I'm the Vice President of Marketing at Clean Prosperity, and our public-facing platform is called Fair Path Forward. And that's where we try to put all this great information into accessible language that will compel Canadians to understand and support carbon taxes here in Canada. And our biggest campaign every year, and the one that I'm here to talk to you about, is our Rebate Campaign. Why do we do this campaign? And, why did I come to Clean Prosperity and want to work here on this issue so badly? Well, because the data is super compelling. We see all this talk, this back and forth on axing the tax, and there being, when you look at varying polls, opposition to the carbon tax. When you look at the data that Clean Prosperity has pulled in over the years, you see that opposition to the carbon tax is about a mile wide and a centimeter deep. I guess to make that match, it should be a kilometer wide and a millimeter deep, and that's largely because of a couple key points. 2/3 of Canadians still don't know about the rebate, which is shocking when you think about it. And, every year we chip away at that with our awareness campaigns, but, to think that 2/3 of people know that there's a tax, but do not know that they get equal or greater amounts of money back is kind of shocking. And as a marketer and a communications professional, a really compelling thing to want to support. Because when you see that people learn about the rebate consistently across our annual polls, we see that support for the tax goes up by 20% and strong opposition shifts to muted opposition or general acquiescence. Like it's hard to get into the polling language, but muted support. And that makes sense, right? Because it's good policy. And as Kian has shown you, when we distill those PBO findings, you see that 60% of Canadian households come out further ahead. So the majority of Canadians get more money back than they put in. So as long as we can make that information really clear to people, then boom, we tend to win them over. So our rebate campaign is something I hope if you've not checked out, I can share screen and show it to you in a sec, which I'll do, but I'm mindful of keeping to time, is this great tool we have. And if you go to fairpathforward.ca, you can click right on it and try it out. And basically, you can calculate your rebate. And we do this because, as the data tells us, once Canadians see, oh, I'm actually getting all this money back, they no longer resist this policy because it is, as Kian has told us, the cheapest and most affordable way to bring down emissions. And also the way that provides Canadians the most flexibility, right? You can spend that rebate however you choose. We hope that Canadians will use it to incentivize, further reductions, that it will incentivize Canadians to make further reductions in their energy usage, but they don't have to. So if you try that rebate calculator, you'll see that, you get your total. And a new thing we've done this year is costed it out so Canadians can not only see what they're getting this year, but what they're getting cumulatively to 2030. And that's important because when you see a small amount of money, I mean, not small, a few $100s is not small at all, but that's not going to help you plan for shifting to an EV or, buying that heat pump. When you see that over, 11 years, you're going to get $30,000 back or $20,000 back. That helps your brain start to, shift this and do some mental accounting and sort of move this money to different buckets where you say, oh, actually, I will be paying more in some ways, but I'll have all this money to buy things that will help me bring my emissions so much further down. And if you try it out, we share a few other key things there that really help get the message across to your constituents, which is, people have heard all these boogeyman stories about how much going to cost them in gas. And, we've done the math. The best data point I'd say is, your rebate money is the equivalent to driving 11 one-way trips across Canada in the average Canadian car, a Toyota RAV4. I mean, that's a lot of driving. It's not a small amount of money, and it will really help help make the case. So, in closing, I hope you guys, am I at time? I've got 1 more minute. I hope you all will try the rebate calculator. We've gotten 200,000 people to use it this year. So please not only use it, but share it. We've had 40,000 people share it. So it's our biggest year by far. And we know we've gotten, I think 2% of the population of Ontario to, in our target ridings to give this calculator a try. So we hope we're shifting awareness and understanding of how important this policy is. And I think in closing, I'll just want to tell you that, you think this policy is a tough sell, and then you very quickly realize as soon as you explain it to people that they're right on side and that the benefits are so overwhelmingly positive that it's just foolish to not be on side. And there's a great environmental economist named Robert Frank who talks about various other things that people put up a fuss about. Seatbelts, smoking, and there was a ton of opposition until there wasn't. And I think and hope, and the data tells us more and more so every day, that that is going to be the same thing with carbon taxes. As soon as a critical mass of people, which I think we're already very close to, if not just over the hill with, see they get money back. It is the cheapest, most affordable, and most flexible way to do things. Then the opposition will disappear almost completely. So with that, thanks so much. Go to fairpathforward.ca and message me if you have any questions about how else you might communicate this policy. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Sarah. That was perfect. I hope you see the artwork that's been drawn for your presentation.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Erica. It's beautiful.
You have a fan, actually. She's a fan. She's one of your fans. Okay, because you're both artists. Okay, so thank you, Sarah. And we'll move on to our next speakers from GreenPAC. So please, Sarah and Essie. I hope you're able to, you're still co-hosts and you can join.
Great. Thanks, Kathy. So I think Essie's there as well. I can't see her, but Essie, are you able to come on screen for a second and say hi too?
Yeah, hi everyone.
Okay, perfect. Okay, I'm going to share my screen and speak. Essie is the program manager of Everyday Advocates at GreenPAC, and I'm going to speak about that, but she's also in Vancouver and it's early in the morning, so I said I'd do the talking here. Kathy, thanks for having us today. I'm going to share some slides, not a media advisory. I'm going to share these slides. Okay. Great. So thanks for having us. My name is Sarah Van Exen, and I'm the executive director at GreenPAC. And if you don't know us, GreenPAC is a Canadian nonprofit organization. We're like Citizens Climate Lobby. We're a nonpartisan organization, and our mission is to activate and inspire and amplify environmental leadership in politics. We believe that the only way we're going to see meaningful progress for the environment is if we elevate environmental leaders across all parties, so that when governments come and go, the progress that has been made isn't lost. And we do that in 3 ways. So we run Canada's only environment-focused parliamentary internship program. We take, young environmental champions, we place them in the offices of changemakers on Parliament Hill. They learn about how politics works, and those MPs get some extra support to help them work for the environment. We also, in 5 elections so far, have endorsed candidates who we consider to be environmental champions. I saw some of them on the call here today. I saw MPP Schreiner, Bell, and Tubbins. So thank you. I hope that I'm not missing anybody else. Maybe you could use the chat if you're here and I didn't see you amongst the many people on the call. And we also have been working on civic engagement in recent years. So we have a program that I'm going to talk to you about today called Everyday Advocates, and I'll dig in there. So Everyday Advocates, which Essie is the manager of, is a new program that we've been working on for the last couple of months, focused on helping Canadians to learn about advocacy. Advocacy can be really scary when you're just getting started. And I know most of the folks on this call, this is your bread and butter. This is what you're doing. You're advocating for carbon pricing and you do it so effectively. But for a lot of people, they think about going in and talking to an elected leader. And I think it can be really intimidating if you haven't done it before. But I think, a lot of the MPPs who are on the call here today would probably confirm for you that they really need to hear from their local constituents. They have so many issues that they have to work on, and most of them are really under-resourced within their office. Unless you're a cabinet minister, you don't have a lot of people on your team. And hearing from the local people in your riding can really help to make issues personal. Those stories are how you make something politically relevant when you're talking to your colleagues in caucus. And knowing that there is a broad base of support for the environment is really important for us to see political change in Canada. So we have been working to provide tools and resources to make it easy to get started. And one of the things that we're focused on right now is hosting town halls. We'd like to host as many of these across Canada as possible this spring. It's important right now before our elected officials get on the campaign trail for them to have these conversations in a public context to make sure they know that their constituents are watching the progress they're making and expect leadership. And if you're in a riding with a really progressive MP or MPP, it's also a really great chance for you to engage others in your riding and to inform them about the issues and about carbon pricing and issues that you think matter for climate. I saw a number of faces on this call who were part of an initiative that we led in 2019 before the federal election. It was nice to see so many of those names again. In 2019, we coordinated a project called 100 Debates on the Environment, which actually saw 104 debates happen in ridings across the country in all but one territory and one province. This was a pretty important initiative. We saw 411 candidates, 87 of whom are now MPs on Parliament Hill, participate in conversations with their constituents about how they plan to lead for the environment. And we got some pretty powerful feedback about that event. That it really did drive the conversation on Parliament Hill. We heard those from the parties themselves, and so we want to repeat it. It looks pretty likely that there's going to be, we have no crystal ball, but there is likely to be an election on the horizon, or there is an election on the horizon. And so we're going to plan to repeat this initiative in the fall. And so I'll just wrap up by saying we would love for anyone here to get involved. You can sign up, and I'll flip to the last side where you can grab that information. Join some of our trainings. Maybe there's a topic there about advocacy that would help you to improve the skills you already have. Maybe we would love it if you'd be interested in hosting a town hall. We'll give you all the tools and resources you need to make it super easy, because I know advocacy is hard work. I know burnout is a real thing. So that's what we're here for. And if you'd like to get involved with a debate in the fall as we move towards an election, we'd love to work with you. Thank you, Kathy.
Thank you, Sarah. If you could stop sharing your screen.
Yeah.
That would be lovely. And you can just take a look at the artwork that Erica's doing. Thank you both for being here today. I wish we had time for questions, but this is more like a speed dating event. So thank you. We'll go to our last speaker, which will, full disclosure, is my daughter, Sophia. And Sophia, are you ready? I just need to spotlight you, sweetheart.
Yes. Hello. Can I start speaking now? Okay. Okay. Hi, my name is Sophia Mather, and I just first wanted to say hello to fellow Gen Climate Action plaintiff in the climate lawsuit against the government of Ontario and fellow CCLer Alex Neufeld. Hi, Alex, if you're watching this, and I'm pretty sure you were here. We got some good news yesterday. The Supreme Court of Germany ruled that their government's climate laws were violating the human rights of children. Let that sink in, everyone. I am 14 years old. I should be planning for my future and not protecting it. I started my climate activism in 2014. All the recent data shows me that greenhouse gases have risen in my province of Ontario. This is terribly disappointing. With President Joe Biden elected in the United States and all major Canadian political parties having a carbon price now, It is time for success and progress. We must reduce greenhouse gases now. My future depends on it. How do we do it? We must follow all the advice of experts, work together, and then talk to politicians and demand action. To all the politicians here today, thank you for being here. To CCLers, have fun lobbying and creating political will to succeed. I thank all who are protecting the earth. Thank you for letting me speak, and that is an amazing drawing. Thank you.
Okay, we finished on time. This is great. Thank you, everyone. I'm going to ask as many people as possible, all the politicians on the call and all the guest speakers turn on their videos so we can take a few pictures, because I think history is happening. So politicians, just so I don't have to search for them. Do you mind if you're not a politician, if you just turn off your video shortly? So this will help me. Politicians, staffers, this is great. Okay. Yeah, and also guest speakers, please turn on your videos. We're going to try and capture a few video shots here. Are you ready? 1, 2, 3. That's one. And others, please do screenshots as well. This is great. And I'll do one more shot. Starting in 1, 2, 3. Excellent. Okay, I'm going to stop recording and you'll get the instructions now.